Okay, and we are recording. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I'm Diana Wren-Rapp. I'm the Assistant Director of the Atlanta Global Studies Center. And on behalf of the Atlanta Global Studies Center and GSU's Office of Undergraduate Research and Fellowships, I'd like to welcome you to today's information session that will cover opportunities at the U.S. Department of State, such as the Thomas R. Pickering Foreign Affairs Program and the Rangel Graduate Fellowship Program. Where we have two wonderful speakers with us today, Mr. Alan Dubose and Mr. Michael Vesey, who will introduce themselves in just a moment. I'd like to just say that while they're speaking, if you have any questions, you can use the chat function, and then you'll have a chance to interact with the speakers after a short presentation. So now it's my pleasure to turn it over to Mr. Alan Dubose and Mr. Michael Vesey.
And hello, everybody. My name is Alan Dubose. I'm the Diplomat in Residence South. Basically means I'm recruiting for the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Foreign Service. So what I'm doing for the next year is I'm spending my time communicating with candidates in Georgia, Tennessee, and Alabama, essentially trying to find the best and the brightest, the people who are going to become our diplomats for the next generation, who are going to be at the embassies and consulates abroad, looking out for U.S. foreign interests abroad. And today we're going to be talking about student programs. Now, one of the reasons we scheduled this so early in the semester, we know you're still trying to figure out what's going on, where the classes are, how to get there efficiently, but we had to get to you quickly because there's a short window of opportunity before we start facing deadlines for our flagship fellowship programs, the Rangel and Pickering programs. And Georgia State it's important to us. Georgia State has students at any given time who win these fellowships. And I tell any of the schools that have this pass that there's no reason every year we shouldn't have at least one Rangel or Pickering fellow from a school that has the demographics that Georgia State does. So this is very important. We have senior advisor to the Rangel and Pickering programs, Michael Vesey, with us today. And so I always use the expression, hearing from the horse's mouth. Well, essentially that's what we're going to have today. Mr. Vesey is going to talk specifically about the Rangel and Pickering programs, and this is your opportunity to ask him detailed questions about those programs. And what I'll do is I will talk about all the other student programs that the Department of State works on or sponsors. And then we will finish up with Q&A. So to start, I'm just going to give a quick overview for context of the U.S. Department of State and U.S. Foreign Service before I hand it over to Mr. Vesey. So again, I understand there's a lot of verbiage and a lot of what's the difference and what does this mean? And here's the short version. The U.S. Department of State was the first U.S. government federal agency that was founded, but it wasn't exactly clear what work was done by whom. So they decided that they were going to carve out, starting in 1924, they were going to carve out the U.S. Foreign Service, the part that was abroad, and those responsibilities, and create the U.S. Foreign Service. So the U.S. Department of State includes, as part of it, the U.S. Foreign Service. So when we talk about diplomats or foreign service officers, the people at the embassies abroad, those are people who are part of the U.S. Foreign Service. They have their own pay scale, promotion plans, expectations, as opposed to someone who may be a civil servant working with the U.S. Department of State. We have them spread across the United States, but concentrated mostly in DC. And the work they're doing is mostly focused on supporting the activities of the U.S. Foreign Service personnel abroad. But many times these people are literally sitting next to each other in an office back in DC. It's just that when they go abroad, it's normally the Foreign Service people who go. So with that context, Mr. Vesey is going to talk to us about the Rangel and Pickering programs, which are for U.S. Foreign Service personnel. Mr. Vesey, take it away, please.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Just to give you some context and tell you a little bit about me. Again, my name is Michael Vesey. I was actually one of the first Pickering Fellows. The fellowship started next year, it'll be 30 years. So I was one of the first. Went to school in Atlanta, and learned about the fellowship by working at the Carter Center. At that time, very few people knew about it. It was its first year. Now we've grown to awarding 90 fellowships, 45 for each program, the Rangel Program and the Pickering Program. I won the fellowship with the grad school, and then I entered the Foreign Service as a consular officer. I spent 24 years in the Foreign Service. About half of it was consular. I was the senior most immigration official on the California U.S. board, State Department immigration official on the California Mexico border. I've taken the lead or played a leading role in the U.S. portion of peace negotiations. I've worked with oil companies on labor rights. I've worked with the private sector, particularly Silicon Valley, on economic development in Africa. And I've worked probably, it seems like every major crisis from the Thailand tsunami to Arab Spring in terms of evacuating Americans and taking care of our American citizens. So that was my career. And then I came over to be the senior advisor for diplomatic fellowships based at Howard, but funded by the U.S. Department of State. Now I'm going to get into the nuts and bolts of the program because we have two important deadlines coming up. Let me share my screen. I always ask to give me a thumbs up, so I make sure that my slide presentation is up. Thank you. Okay, so we're going to talk about our two fellowship programs, and under one of our fellowships, the Rangel, there are two components to it. So I'll speak to a few if we have any underclassmen on the call. So let's start with the Rangel program, the Charles B. Rangel International Affairs Program. We're actually going to start with the summer enrichment program first, because this speaks specifically to students who have at least 30 hours of coursework. So we're talking about sophomores and juniors particularly. Okay, so the Rangel program overall prepares students for careers in international affairs. And as part of SEP, the summer enrichment program, we have a 6-week program that happens in the summer. We're close to having a date for the applications, the application opening, but usually applications open mid to late October and close sort of late January, early February. But basically what it is it's a program to introduce students to current issues in foreign affairs and careers and opportunities in international affairs across the spectrum, but in particular, the U.S. Department of State. So you'll spend 6 weeks at Howard University in academic courses, seminars, professional skills training. We'll do a lot of activities introducing students to people, professionals in international affairs, from think tanks to the Hill, of course, to the State Department and NGOs. During that time, you'll receive tuition, travel, room and board from us, and a stipend of $3,200 for the 6-week program. So to be eligible for this program, you have to be a U.S. citizen with a GPA of 3.2 or above, and a full-time undergraduate student with at least sophomore status. Again, mid-October 2021 is sort of when to look for this application opening. The meat of why I'm here is because, like I said, two very important deadlines. First, the Charles B. Rangel International Affairs Graduate Fellowship. And I'm specifically speaking to seniors and individuals who have finished their bachelor's degree, who are ready to go into grad school in the fall of 2022. This particular program is a career program, meaning it leads to a career in the State Department as a Foreign Service officer, as a U.S. diplomat. The award is $84,000 over 2 years, so $42,000 a year for tuition and fees, living expenses, to enter into a graduate program of relevance to the foreign service. So a master's program of relevance to the foreign service. When I came in, it was basically a bunch of students who were majoring in international affairs or international relations or some version of that. We are expanding this program every year. We're building partnerships so that students can major in different areas as long as it has relevance to the foreign service. So like international MBA programs, schools of social work that have an international component, migration studies, or just to name a few, international economics, things like that. There's a broad range of programs you can major in. However, we do maintain our closest partners in sort of the traditional schools that you think of with regard to foreign affairs, Georgetown, Johns Hopkins, SAIS, American, Harvard, Columbia SEPA program. Those tend to be the usual suspects, but it's really up to the fellow. And many of our programs, many of our partners actually pay anything that we don't pay, they'll pick up the tab. Some of them, many of them do, but that's up to those schools. So here's how the program works. So you win the fellowship. Let me go back. So you win the fellowship, and sort of in the late November, December timeframe, and then you immediately start applying for graduate schools. So that takes place from sort of December on into the spring. In May, after you finish your degree, if you're a senior, in May, we have an orientation program. It's a couple of weeks. And then you begin a 10-week internship on Capitol Hill, either with a member of Congress or with a committee, usually of relevance to international affairs. Then you start grad school in the fall of 2022. In the summer in between your 2-year grad program, you'll have a 10-week internship overseas at a US embassy or consulate. During that time, we have an extensive mentoring program, and I can speak about that if you want me to. But after you finish grad school, you come into the State Department as a US diplomat with a 5-year service obligation. So again, many of these requirements the eligibility requirements are the same. US citizenship, cumulative GPA of at least 3.2. That's a hard GPA, as Mr. DeBose will tell you that 3.18 will not get seen. So you have to have a 3.2. Oh, I'm sorry, I went backwards. Goodness. The two are fine. US citizenship, 3.2 GPA, and then planning to enroll in a graduate program in the fall of 2022. The application deadline is September 29th, so we're talking about a little under a month. And then you can follow the rest of the trajectory in terms of how we get from the deadline, application deadline, to the notification of award. All right, the Thomas Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship Program. A lot of this is a repeat from the Rangel. They're modeled after each other. The Thomas Pickering Foreign Affairs Fellowship Program, again, it's a $42,000 a year award, $84,000 in total. Many grad schools pick up the rest if there is, additional costs. There's an orientation program, but this orientation program happens in between your first and second year of grad school. It's a couple of it's like 2-week program, and then you move into a 10-week internship at the State Department. So Pickering, the domestic internship is at the State Department. Rangel, it's on Capitol Hill. Again, the mentoring program, and then after you finish grad school, after you finish your 2 years, you graduate, you'll have your second internship under Pickering, and that's at an embassy or consulate overseas. Couple of months after you finish that internship, you'll come in with the same service requirement, same service obligation of 5 years. I want to make sure I'm not going. Okay. All right. So the selection process for Pickering is a week earlier than Rangel. So we're talking about an even tighter timeline. September 22nd is the deadline. So we're talking about 3 weeks, I think from yesterday, I think. So we're cutting it close, but I did my application in 2 weeks. I don't recommend it, but I made it. Eligibility requirement is the same, U.S. citizenship, 3.2 GPA, and plans to enroll in a graduate program in 2022. So a couple of key tips for preparing a competitive application. Certainly pay very close attention to your writing assignments as part of the application. The 600-word or less statement of interest is sort of, I think, is sort of the standard bearer of the application. This is the thing that differentiates you from everyone else. There'll be a lot of GPAs that look alike. There'll be a lot of international experience that may look alike, or just leadership experience that may look similar. But this statement of interest is where you get to put context to all of the information we're going to receive. And you can tell us what motivates you to a career in international affairs, in the foreign service, particularly, what motivates you to public service. Those things are important. How did you get to this point? This is your story. Use it wisely. The 350-word essay, we just want to know that you can write, that you can take a position, that you can defend that position, you can plan and organize an essay, and that you're grammatically sound. Other things that I would say are important is sit down with the people recommending you. I can tell you from sitting on this committee in the past, I don't sit on it anymore. So I'm not making any decisions here. But from what, the years that I did this, I looked at applications. It was astonishing to see people who chose to have these high level, folks recommending them, but didn't really know who they were, or weren't able to connect the student or the individual to the foreign service or to the programs. Make sure you sit down with them and your recommenders know, what this program is all about, so they can talk about why you are a great fit for Pickering and Rangel. If you get a chance, have them send you the letter of recommendation before it goes in, because I can tell you their grammatical mistakes can be distracting. So, you have a chance to make sure that you're getting a great recommendation and that, everything is what it should be. Any type of demonstrated need for financial assistance always, is important. If it's not on your FAFSA, you will have spaces on the application where you can interject, whatever the situation you have. And we can talk more about that in Q&A if you want to. Extracurricular activities, community service, any type of demonstration of leadership ability, or the 13 dimensions that we measure foreign service officers by, and 13 dimensions are in careers.state.gov. Mr. DeBose could talk a little bit about that. Very important. Honors and awards, extremely important. And again, proofread everything. You don't do anything, proofread everything. With that, here are our websites. If you go on our websites and click under events, we have info sessions and office hours leading up to the deadlines of the 2 fellowships. Join them. Listen to what other individuals, listen to the questions that they have. They're very informative. If you have more questions, join those office hours, join those information sessions and ask. And I will leave my email address in the chat so that you can contact me directly. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mr. DeBose.
Thank you very much, Mr. VC. And what I will do now is I will put my presentation up. After I finish this, we'll go to Q&A. And so please verbally let me know. Oh, not yet. Okay, verbally let me know if you see full screen, please.
Yep.
Okay, So again, my name is Alan Dubose. I'm the diplomat in residence based in the Atlanta area. I'm working from suburbia because I'm not traveling right now, but normally I would be going to college campuses. I probably would have been to downtown to visit Georgia State by now, but we can communicate this way. You're going to hear me say over and over and over today, careers.state.gov. Careers.state.gov is an excellent site. It's deceptively good because you click on one thing and it leads to loads of more information. And really about 80% plus of what comes out of my mouth today, you can find at careers.state.gov. So I strongly encourage you to read through that. Also, all roads lead through careers.state.gov. So when you hear me talk about other places that are sources of information, you may forget those other places. Well, they'll be posted at careers.state.gov. So if you go there, they will lead you to the other sites you may need. I can be contacted at dir.south@state.gov. And if you ever want to set an appointment to talk to me, the first thing I'm going to say is, have you been to careers.state.gov? And the reason is because for you to be able to understand the context of maybe some of my responses, it will require you to have done your due diligence earlier to understand about the careers or student programs with the U.S. Department of State or with the U.S. Foreign Service. And with that, I just have this little graphic on my left of Secretary Powell, because back in 2004, I saw this, and I had been out working for over 17 years in private sector, and I saw this ad, and you probably can't see it in there. It says, we're looking for administrators. And I thought to myself, then I'm an administrator. And I never thought of myself working in the Foreign Service. I never looked at myself as a diplomat. I thought those are international relations type people. And what you're going to discover today, if you didn't already know it, is that essentially you can major in anything and become a diplomat if you demonstrate the skills that it takes. And the U.S. Foreign Service is committed to finding these people. And one way we're doing it is through the Rangel and Pickering Fellowships. So with that said, let's talk about the mission of the U.S. Department of State and the Foreign Service. Our role at the U.S. Department of State is to lead the U.S. foreign policy through diplomacy. And I'll just kind of stop there. So there are other agencies that involve themselves in foreign affairs, but our mission is to speak for U.S. foreign policy abroad, not domestically, but abroad. So we are the U.S. diplomatic corps. We represent the United States. And of course, it's important that we represent the United States by looking like the United States and being diverse as much as we can, because that's what the U.S. is. And it's important that people abroad see that, so they recognize that U.S. policy is not just the policy of one group that may be in authority at any given time, that it represents U.S. policy in general. So now we'll talk student programs, and don't forget, we'll have time to go back to the Q&A. So if I go too fast, don't worry about it. You'll catch it later. We talked about the Rangel and Pickering programs, and the FATE Fellowship program is not as old. Was started in 2017, much for the same reasons that Alan Dubose didn't know that my skills were something that the Foreign Service wanted. IT. We have a shortage of IT personnel because most STEM people or most techies don't think about the fact that we need those skills. So we're perpetually short-staffed. The FATE Fellowship is hopefully going to help us with this problem, and it's modeled after Rangel or Pickering in that it's a 2-year fellowship, with the one significant difference being that the fellowship can be used for 2 years for the student to earn their bachelor's degree in an IT-related field or their master's degree in an IT-related field. So for example, someone who's currently a sophomore would be able to use this fellowship next year for their junior and senior year to get their bachelor's degree in an IT-related field, or someone who might be graduating this year would be able to use it to enter graduate school and get the IT-related master's degree in the next 2 years. Of course, if someone's already out, they may have graduated and they're out in the work world, they'd be eligible as well if they wanted to go back and get a 2-year master's degree in an IT-related field. The ages have to be between 20 and 59. And again, the minimum GPA is 3.2. One must be able to secure a medical clearance and a top secret level security clearance. And again, they have to be US citizens. We don't care if they were naturalized or if they were born in the States, but these are the requirements to get the security clearance. That's why it's a requirement. Some of the FATE Fellowship Program features, again, they're very, very similar to Rangel or Pickering. The amount of the funding is a little bit lower, but it fits with the programs. IT programs are not quite as expensive as some of the other programs. It's a $37,500. The internships, the first summer is going to be at the Department of State, and the second would be abroad after the second year of study. And of course, after completing the program, there would be a 5-year commitment as an information management specialist with the U.S. Department of State. Now, we don't have the history to prove this, but based on what we see from Rangel Pickering, that 5-year commitment is really just a 5-year start to a 20-year or longer career. That most people who end up joining the U.S. Foreign Service stay a lot longer because they join for a reason, and that's the lifestyle, frequently the excitement, the fact that they're going to come in immediately doing substantive work. So for example, we expect our information management specialists on their first tour to their last tour to be prepared to be supervisors. It costs Uncle Sam somewhere between $700,000 and $800,000 on average to send one of our diplomats abroad for a 2 to 3 year tour. So usually they are not doing hands-on work when they go abroad, they are supervising. And it's very important that the candidates have the skills to be able to do that, not just the techie skills. In this case, this just opened yesterday, and the deadline is going to be January 31 of 2022. You can find out more about this at fatefellowship.org, or where else can you find it? At careers.state.gov. If you click there, it'll lead you to Fate Fellowship, and you'll find more information. But I think I pretty much covered the basics. Some other opportunities we're going to talk about is our largest program for internships is the U.S. State Department Internship Program. This is an unpaid program for students who want to work at the embassies and consulates abroad, or they may work at a location in the United States. Oftentimes that's in DC, but not always. But these come across a few times a year. They're announced in usajobs.gov. But what I always encourage people to do is go to careers.state.gov and put a tickler in. So when one of these opens up, you'll be sent an email that says it's open. And when you click on it, it'll lead you to the details at usajobs.gov, where you normally have to go through the application process itself. The spring cohort should be announced pretty soon. If they're going to have it, we should be hearing about it soon. So if you send that tickler, then you'll get more information when it does open up. The VSFS, United States Foreign Service Internship Program, is a program that is a paid program that is specifically intended for sophomores or juniors with demonstrated financial need. So a significant portion, being like 25% of what is reviewed by the panel, is related to financial need. So these people who do become interns have 2 consecutive summers. And the first summer, they go to DC for 3 weeks of training, including diplomatic history, writing. You're going to hear that theme over and over, is writing, and professional development. Following that training, the interns work for 7 weeks on policy desk or in regional or functional bureaus. So for example, a policy desk might be public diplomacy, regional bureau might be Latin American, and be the executive office where they handle administrative issues. The second summer is a 10-week assignment at a U.S. embassy or consulate abroad. Unfortunately, this deadline already passed, which is why I always encourage people to put that tickler in at careers.state.gov. So the people who would be eligible next year today would be freshmen or sophomores, and this would open up again in August of 2022 for the summer of 2023. The next program is a paid internship program. The Pathways Paid Internships are actually a federal government program that the U.S. Department of State participates in. And this is pretty much like it sounds. It's a paid program where the interns are doing substantive work, mostly working with civil servants in the DC area. They close these very quickly. So what I encourage everyone to do is also go to usajobs.gov and set up a profile there, get a template set up with your resume in it, because what will happen is when these are announced, they're very competitive, and it may say it'll be open for 6 weeks, but in reality, they'll put a cap. And once that cap of applicants is reached, they'll close it. So it may be, even though they announce it for 6 weeks, they may close it at 2 days if they get enough applicants who are qualified applicants at that point. The other Pathways program is our recent graduates program. And this program is really more of a career development program. It's open to people who've already graduated from college, but they haven't been out of college more than 2 years. And they go through this 1-year development program, again, mostly working on the civil service side. And if they are successful in that program, then they become eligible for opportunities for full-time employment as a civil servant within the US government or with the Department of State. And one thing I always tell students is to cast a wide net. So many times you hear about these opportunities and you may say, this doesn't exactly fit where I want to go. But keep in mind, all of these are very competitive. So if you see anything that looks like it's something that you're interested in, even regarding the agency, it might not be Department of State, but let's say you're interested in, I'll pick public affairs, and they have public affairs at a different agency, go ahead and apply for an internship there, because you may not get one at state, but if you get it at the other agency, when it comes time to apply for a full-time career position at the Department of State, your resume is going to be that much stronger because you would have had that internship maybe at that other agency. So cast the wide net at this point and see how it works out over time. Those who persevere tend to get these opportunities. The last one I'll talk about is the Virtual Student Federal Service Internship Program, or VSFS. And again, this is a federal program that the U.S. Department of State participates in. And this was set up to be a virtual program. So when the pandemic hit, this really wasn't affected at all. The way the program works is the intern makes a commitment to no more than 10 hours a week worth of work. It's unpaid, but the good thing is they get to work with an individual supervisor, so they can develop kind of that mentor-protege relationship with one person. And what would normally happen is the supervisor would meet 1 day a week with the intern, give the intern their assignment, and the intern would then spend their 10 hours working on it. Then the following week, they would give the deliverer the product. Or if it was a project that went longer, they would give an update on where they are. And pretty much this is what continues throughout the academic year. The supervisor is definitely going to recognize that the student has student commitments. So when it comes exam time, they're probably going to make it easier for the student. And then other times the student can make it up. The VSFS opens July 1 and closes July 30. Then they do the interviews in August, and usually the interns start their work in September, which means that we have missed our window. Most of the VSFS interns started about a week ago. And so anybody who's going to be eligible for this will be looking at next year. And the good thing about this is that it is open to different classes, not just 1 or 2 classes. So with that said, I'm going to wrap it up, and then we'll go to the Q&A. DIRSouth@state.gov is the way to get in touch with me if you want to talk to me through a separate appointment. What am I going to say? Have you been to careers.state.gov and done your due diligence? And again, the reason is because when I start saying things to you, you need a context. And if you've already read through careers.state.gov, it'll make a lot more sense. And of course, usajobs.gov is where a lot of these positions are applied for. So it's always good to do an overview there, but going through careers.state.gov will save you time if you do want to find something at usajobs.gov that is related to the Department of State. And with that, I have taken off the share. And what I'm going to do is, if someone has a question, why don't you go ahead and raise your hand and let me recognize you, because we have a decent sized group, and we'll see how this goes as we take the questions. So Nadia, why don't you go ahead and mute yourself and ask your question.
Hi, I just want to start off by saying thank you for an amazing presentation. My question is for Mr. VC. I hope I pronounced it right. I'm so sorry if I didn't. You in the Rangel presentation, you highlighted that if someone wants to go ahead or go forward with the application, that this is a gateway to work in diplomacy. And I was wondering, would you recommend it for someone who has aspirations to go into law school after? Because while I am very much interested in international affairs and diplomacy, and I want to work specifically in the sector of international law and humanitarian rights, I wanted to know if there is still, if you would recommend it for other postgraduate, I guess, degrees like a JD.
Okay, well, for these fellowships, Pickering and Rangel, law school does not apply. We can't take in a fellow who wants to use that fellowship to go to law school. However, many of the master's programs, the graduate programs, have law components, whether they be environment, international law, international trade, immigration. When you work with the State Department, you're dealing with international law all the time, regardless of whether or not you have that law degree. Some individuals in the department have gone back to school after entering the Foreign Service. But with this program, you'll get your degree, your master's in a field of relevance. You'll come in with a 5-year service commitment, and then you're on your way in terms of a career. If at some point down the line, you decide I want to go back to school or whatever, there are ways to do that within the department. So with this fellowship, unfortunately, law school is not one of the things that you can do with it.
Thank you so much.
Anybody else has a question, please just raise your hand and ask it. I'll recognize you. All right, if anybody's thinking, please look in the chat. What you're going to see is I put 2 things in there. One of them is my email address, but another one is what we call the 13 dimensions. And basically, oh, there's my dog barking. But basically, the 13 dimensions are characteristics that the U.S. Foreign Service has determined are leading indicators of what a successful diplomat looks like as far as what they bring. So these trickle into the fellowship programs and internship programs we have, in the sense that ultimately we're trying to strengthen people in these skills. So if you click on that link, you'll go through the details of those skills, but you're going to see things there like ethics, like judgment, what we call cultural adaptability, which is hugely important to us. And cultural adaptability simply means, think of it this way. You could be a whiz at whatever you're doing in Atlanta, but if we picked you up and took you to an environment that you'd never been in before, are you going to succeed and overcome the challenges, or are you going to crash and burn because it's not like you do in Atlanta? So even if you think you have a lot of these dimensions, the important thing is to balance them out and to get good at as good as you can at all these dimensions, because ultimately these 13 dimensions will be needed for a successful career in the U.S. Foreign Service. As Mr. VC can tell you, if he gives any explanations or stories about his experiences, I'm sure he can tell you about when he's needed each of these 13 dimensions. He worked in consular, and consular is required to take care of American citizens abroad. And if you ever want to know what Americans do abroad, oh my goodness, talk to a consul officer and you will hear stories. So again, even if someone is not competing for one of these fellowships, these are ways you can strengthen your skills. And if you do want to compete for one of these fellowships or scholarships, or internships, strengthening yourself in these 13 dimensions will help you significantly. Any other questions someone may have? Mr. VC, do you have anything you wanted to address, maybe about foreign service life or about anything else?
I think the best part of this career, when you're trying to make that decision on whether or not you want to do this, with this generation, I see a number of folks graduating from college or going on to grad school, and when they get out into the workforce, there are many people who change careers like every 2-3 years. The best part of this career is that you're changing your job every 2 to 3 years. Someone like me, I have career ADD, and I wanted to do a lot of things. I just couldn't sort of, put my finger on one particular thing that I wanted to accomplish. And this career has allowed me to do completely different, be involved in the conversation in completely different ways. And one of the reasons why I remained in for 2.5 decades is because at every point I was doing something different and I was contributing in a different way. And then I wake up one day and I've been in for 25 years. So, it's such a perk of the career. I think one of the biggest challenges, and it's not really a challenge, it's just the advice that I give people coming into a foreign service is be ready to strike a balance between your career aspirations and climbing that ladder and taking care of your personal and family life. Every decision that you make in terms of your next job or depends on you striking that balance. Whether you're married, you have kids, making sure that they're well taken care of, that your spouse is able to do what he or she wants to do, in his or her own career, that your children are going to great schools. And we have some fantastic international schools out there. And then at the same time, managing your own career, making sure that you're making that progression. People who strike that balance from job to job are the happiest foreign service officers out there.
Yeah, it's interesting you would mention that one. About an hour before we started, I got a call from a colleague who just got back from overseas. And he said he found out today that he's going to have to curtail from his upcoming assignment, meaning that he had planned on going somewhere and now he's being told he can't go. But the reason was because one of his family members couldn't get a clearance, a medical clearance. Anybody who goes overseas has to be cleared by the medical office. So even though he was okay, one of his family members wasn't okay. And so, okay, he's going to have to adjust. And these are the sorts of things that do happen, and everybody has to make a decision what works well for their family. We all go through these as you get older or have families from time to time. But I will tell anybody in a heartbeat that my daughters, I have 2 who've been traveling with me for the last 15 years, and they've been exposed to opportunities I would have killed for when I was growing up because of the opportunities. I mean, they were going to private schools that cost $20,000 to $30,000 a year in tuition. I wouldn't have been able to afford that if I was living in the States trying to send my kids to school. And I have a daughter who's in college right now. The last time she took Spanish was when she was in 3rd grade, and she's doing so well. She went straight to the senior level class in Spanish because she wanted to take Spanish Lit. So she never studied it in class. She just learned this from living in Ecuador and Mexico. And these are the sort of opportunities that family members can have. So I definitely get it. I agree with it. I never talk to students and try to talk them into anything. I just say, here's what it is. And what I've learned in life is some people say, I don't think that's me. And other people say, tell me more about this. Yeah, this sounds kind of interesting. And that's usually the latter is what we're looking for. because ultimately that's what you need. We are a lifelong learning organization. What's ironic is we don't require a bachelor's degree, but the irony is most of our people have advanced degrees because they go earn them on their own. They have a thirst for knowledge. And every time before we go overseas, whatever's required to do that job overseas is reviewed. And if you don't have every single class you need to succeed in that job overseas, no problem. We send you across the river to our own school called Foreign Service Institute, and you study languages there from native speakers, or you study what we call tradecraft, which is what you need to know to be able to do the work for that assignment before you go. So someone may go over to FSI for a month, someone may go for a year, all depending on what it is they need to be able to go be successful abroad. Then they go do it for abroad for 2 or 3 years. And what do? Come back to the States, rest a little bit, and then do it again. And that's your career in the US Foreign Service. So it's kind of like working for a consulting firm in that regard, that you always want to be ready to learn the latest and greatest and then go apply it. So that's kind of what I look at are those some of the career choices. So we have about 14 minutes left. Anything else you wanted to cover? If not, if Mr. VC doesn't have anything, we'll wrap up. But Mr. VC, do you have anything you wanted to add?
I'll just add that if you are like underclassmen have some time in terms of the SEP program, but I want to specifically speak to the seniors online and students who may have finished their bachelor's or in grad school. The deadlines for the Pickering and Rangel programs are coming up fast. If you have any questions, whether it be the career, you're not, you want to know a little bit more about the career before you make this career decision, because that's really what applying for this fellowship is. It's a career decision. If you have any questions about it, I can cover every aspect of that. I can cover anything that you have, any questions you may have about the application. Please reach out to me. Georgia State has had a wonderful pipeline of applicants and fellows, actually. Each year, it seems like these days, and we would love to see one or many of you, come in and be colleagues, be foreign service officers, diplomats, working alongside of us and answering the range of different foreign policy issues and management issues and consular issues we got going on these days.
I see one question before we wrap up. I see one question popped up in the chat. How does a career in diplomacy that requires consistent travel affect family life? I'll tell you a quick story. So keep in mind, again, I had been working for 17 years before I joined the State Department. So I was married with children, and I was literally sitting in front of the computer reading careers.state.gov and reading through it and saying, ooh, this is me, this is me. And I said, oh, I want to do this. So like any smart married man, you know what I did? I said, Marcella, would you come here? And my wife came and stood over my shoulder, and I explained to her, I said, what do you think about, can you hold just one sec? My daughter just arrived home. I always say I have a dog, a cat, and a daughter. I don't know which one's the noisiest. In any case, so Marcella stood over my shoulder. I said, Marcy, what do you think about the next 20 years where we have a career where we're going to go from place to place? We're going to have the girls in different schools from time to time. There are going to be places where we maybe started studying the language 4 or 5 months earlier, so it's not something we really understand. There are going to be different cultures. They might drive on the other side of the road. What do you think about this? And she, you know what she said? She didn't say a word. You know what she said? That was it. Because she had that personality. She already lived in Chile, she lived in Switzerland, she lived in Colombia. So to her, she had that personality ready for cultural adaptability. That's why I say I never try to talk anybody into anything, because if you have that personality, then this is exciting. But nothing's wrong if you don't. If I were 22, I would not have had that personality. I wasn't ready for it at 22. So different people get there at different points, and some people just think, nah, it's not worth it. But for those who are looking at it now, I would strongly encourage them to look at these programs, because trust me, the fellowships, the Rangel and Pickering fellowships and the FATE are truly respected programs. Mr. VC didn't go into some of the universities that are supporting the efforts to get the Rangel and Pickering fellows to go to their school. Pick me. And I just explained earlier today that Carnegie Mellon just announced with that they're covering the cost for people who take FATE and study at Carnegie Mellon. So even though we're paying $37.5 per year, and it costs $57 to go to Carnegie Mellon per year, Carnegie Mellon saying, okay, no problem, come on, we'll take your students, because we want to be the school that is recognized for educating those FATE fellows. And similarly, Mr. VC has a list of many schools, Ivy League or similar, that are doing the same thing for the Rangel and Pickering fellows.
I'm going to give a sort of another perspective on the family question here, because I came from a very different situation than Mr. DeBose. I was a Pickering fellow, so very young. Many of our fellows are not married; they don't have kids. Although we do have fellows, a number of fellows these days who are, in their mid-20s or late 20s or older. But when I came in, I was just finishing undergrad, going to grad school, dating, and then I got married a week before, or a week after I finished my master's. And then a month before I entered the art orientation class as a Foreign Service officer. My wife was a journalist. She studied journalism, had her first job. So we both have are into our first jobs. She had her first job working as a TV reporter, and before that, she had no international experience. She had basically lived in her hometown, her whole life. So this was a really new experience for her. I was a military brat, so I was used to bouncing around the world. So this is a very new experience to her. So how do you make this work? Someone who has a career that doesn't seem like it's that transferable if you're talking about local news, and someone who's going into international affairs. Well, this is when I talk about making sure that you manage your career and you strike a balance. Every conversation was about our next assignments was a group conversation. There were times that we would have to come back to Washington so that we could be domestic. There were times that we had to look for assignments on the US border so that we could make things work. I took 2 unaccompanied assignments, which were very difficult. Our kids actually did well. I mean, they were born into the Foreign Service. They went to these outstanding schools, and every decision was sort of centered around school. But there were sacrifices that had to be made in terms of career. There are jobs that I couldn't take, because, we wanted to make sure both, careers work, and vice versa. There were opportunities for her that we never saw coming. For example, she was the media coordinator for Assistant Secretary of State at one point. So there were opportunities for her that, wouldn't have been available to her had we not been in the Foreign Service. So we pieced it all together. It wasn't the easiest thing in the world, but if you're thinking about striking that balance and you're good, you're focused on it, you can do it. It's, there are many married couples with children in the Foreign Service where both spouses have, jobs that don't necessarily line up, in a neat way. It's doable.
So again, it's kind of the unofficial thing everybody says in the Department of State is, well, it all depends. And once you get in, you start to see why. Because what works well at one post might not work well in another post. So what they do is they have so much information for us. So we can do research before we even try to go somewhere. And we can say, oh, I don't think I want to go there because this doesn't really look like it's going to be for my family. Hey, this other place is. And that's what happens is once you get on the inside, you start to see what works best for your family, and then you adjust accordingly. Some of the jobs or the opportunities they have there are what we call EFM positions, basically positions that tend to be family members who want to work. Then we have others where what we call tandems. And this simply means that one person is they're in the foreign service, and the spouse decides, you know what, I think I want to join too. And there's a way we work through these processes. I had a colleague, when he joined, his wife had never left the state of Utah. And I think 5 years later, she ended up applying for a position tandem couple. So it all depends on your situation. You figure out how to adjust accordingly. Before we run out of time, I do see one more question. I think it's really more for you, Mr. VC. When do you recommend applying for graduate school while pursuing the Rangel?
Well, you can start looking at graduate schools now. Certainly, I would say get your application in first. You've got time with, applying to graduate school. Get your application in first. Focus on that. Another thing, I would even say focus on the GRE, even before you sort of, you narrow down that focus to, what a particular grad school. But this is the time, if you're a senior, this is the time to start thinking about all that stuff. And I know that, that deadlines are going to come one after another, but I would say get your application in, concentrate on the GRE. I would even take it, ahead of hearing from us, because you won't hear from us. The notifications come out late November, early December. And if you have to take the GRE again, the good thing about it is GRE has a relationship with us where they will discount your GRE, taking the GRE if you have to take it again before actually submitting your grad school applications. Some grad schools want applications in the fall. Many of them want them, sort of January timeframe. So you have time for that. Focus on this application. And then when we get to the next step, if you are a finalist, then we'll have a whole another set of, things to talk to you about. And that includes, when to start identifying grad schools, because at that point, you'll have a 50% chance of winning the fellowship if you get to the finalist stage. Also, apply for both the Pickering and Rangel programs. There's no reason why you shouldn't. The application is exactly the same. So you don't have to recreate things. There are different people looking at these applications. So, if you could say the exact same thing and the Pickering folks won't know that you said the same things to the Rangel folks. Make sure that you change the program. Make sure you're identifying the correct program when you're submitting, because we've seen people slip up and say, I want the Rangel program because of this, but they're talking to the Pickering folks. So make sure that is taken care of. But outside of that, it's the same application. No reason not to double your chances.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the expectation is that you're going to do that. So again, just make sure it's kind of sloppy if you just cut and paste and put the wrong name in the wrong program. But their expectation is that you're going to apply to both. Look at it. They want good people. So they're not trying to find ways to shock you and, we got you. No, they want the best to apply for both. And if there are 45 opportunities for Pickering, you happen to be number 46 on their list, they're hoping you apply to Rangel. So that's the goal. With that said, we're in our last minute. Last call, otherwise I'm going to turn it over. Okay, keep in mind that I can be contacted at DIR South at state.gov and Mr. VC at michael.vc@howard.edu. Did you want to say something?
You got it.
All right, I got it. So handing it back. Thank you.
And I just want to say to everyone, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Mr. DeBose, and thank you, Mr. VC, for sharing these programs with us. To the students, if any of these programs sound interesting to you, please contact Mr. DuBose or Mr. VC for more information. And just know that the Office of Undergraduate Research and Fellowships and the Atlanta Global Studies Center is here to help you. So we recommend that you contact the Writing Center to get help with your application. We also recommend that you contact your professors early if you want them to write a strong letter of recommendation, and sit down and talk with them and talk about the fellowship, and give them plenty of time. And then also just do a little research, before you start applying. So you can contact me or the Office of Undergraduate Research and Fellowships to get help with your application. So thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful evening.